A sharp shove jolted Master Sergeant Danielle Harris forward, her hand tightening around the strap of her duffel as the flight attendant hissed, "Can you not block the aisle?" The cabin fell into a tense silence. No one spoke, but every eye was watching. Danielle didn't raise her voice, didn't even flinch. She just reached for her phone, because one quiet call was about to ground an entire flight. The buzz at Gate B9 in Dallas Love Field wasn't loud, but it had that restless energy only airports could muster, rolling suitcases bumping ankles, toddlers sticky with juice, and weary adults clutching lukewarm coffee like lifelines. In the middle of it all stood Master Sergeant Danielle Harris, boots planted, shoulders square, but her bones aching with the kind of tired that didn't come from lack of sleep. It came from years of service, from sandstorms and bunkers, from missing birthdays and funerals. She'd been in uniform for 18 years. And today, she was going home. Not just back to Tucson, but home, to her parents' house where the scent of peach cobbler clung to the air, where her niece waited with her hand-painted anti-D sign, where she could finally exhale. She adjusted the strap of her duffel, the weight dragging at her shoulder like a final reminder of everything she carried, physically, emotionally. As the final boarding call echoed over the PA system, Danielle stepped forward into the line for Flight 462. The passengers in front shuffled slowly, some checking phones, some sighing audibly. Danielle offered a polite smile to the gate agent as she scanned her ticket. "Thank you for your service," the woman said softly, almost automatically. Danielle nodded in acknowledgement. No fanfare needed. She just wanted her seat. Row 18C, aisle. As she entered the plane, the blast of recycled air hit her like a wall. For a heartbeat, it felt like freedom. She moved carefully, weaving past passengers wedged in narrow rows, keeping her body compact out of habit, out of respect. Her seat wasn't far, just halfway down. She found it easily, but the overhead bins were jammed with carry-ons. Danielle paused, adjusted her grip, and hoisted her duffel up. It caught on the lip. She gave it another push, her fingers straining. That's when it happened. A sudden, firm pressure against her back, rude, unnecessary, shoved her forward slightly. "Can you not block the aisle?" came the voice. Sharp. Irritated. Not even a hint of patience. Danielle turned just enough to see the source, a flight attendant, tall, fit, mid-40s, with rigid posture and flawless makeup. Her blonde hair was pinned in a tight French twist, her frown even tighter. The name tag read, Kendra Vale. Kendra didn't wait for a response. She brushed past Danielle like she wasn't there, like she was just a barrier between her and efficiency. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just dismissal. The moment was quiet, but it rippled. The man across the aisle, flipping through a magazine, glanced up with a raised brow. A woman 2 rows back sucked in a quiet breath. Danielle didn't flinch. She lowered her bag into the bin, adjusted it until it slid snug, and took her seat without a word. Her hands, scarred, calloused, strong, rested in her lap. But her chest was tight. Not with rage. With restraint. She stared ahead, breathing slow and deep. She hadn't come home to be treated like furniture. Not after all she'd given. Kendra's voice echoed from the front, louder now, "Let's go, folks. We're already behind schedule." Danielle reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Scrolled. Found the name. COL Ruben Marks. Her old CO. He once told her, "If anyone ever treats you less than what you are in uniform, you call me." No hesitation. She hesitated only for a second. Then she tapped the screen. The call connected after one ring. "Marks." "Sir, it's Harris," Danielle said quietly, turning her face toward the window. "We've got a situation." His voice didn't skip a beat. "Tell me everything." She kept her tone even, laying out the facts. No embellishment. No emotion. Just the truth. While she spoke, Kendra marched down the aisle again, arms crossed, eyes scanning the cabin like she was preparing to scold a classroom. Danielle finished the call with a calm "Thank you, sir." She slid the phone back into her pocket. This wasn't about making a scene. This was about setting it straight. But Kendra wasn't done. She stopped near Danielle's row, her voice pointed and loud. "Next time," she said coldly, "try not to block the entire aisle. Some of us are trying to work." Danielle's gaze didn't shift, but her voice did. Calm. Controlled. "I asked you not to touch me." That wasn't a suggestion. There was a flicker in Kendra's eyes, something between surprise and contempt, but before she could respond, the cockpit door cracked open. A stocky man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair stepped out, speaking into the handheld radio clipped to his vest. "We're going to delay departure," he said firmly, "pending review of a personnel matter involving a service member." The words landed like a jolt. Passengers leaned forward. Heads turned. Whispers spread like brushfire. Kendra blinked, her mouth parting, then closing again. She forced a laugh. "It's just a little misunderstanding," she said lightly, waving her hand. The captain didn't flinch. He stepped further into the aisle and picked up the cabin mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be experiencing a short delay while we resolve an onboard matter. We appreciate your patience." A few groans followed, but mostly, the cabin fell into a kind of loaded silence. Kendra's smile vanished. She turned on her heel and stormed toward the back. Danielle sat still. Eyes on the window. Breathing even. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about something bigger. About every soldier who ever came home expecting peace and got disrespect instead. 15 minutes passed. Tense. Still. Until the intercom crackled again. "Due to an onboard personnel matter, we are temporarily grounding the aircraft. Airport security has been requested to assist." Kendra returned to the front. Her hands were clenched. Her skin pale. Passengers watched. An older woman across from Danielle raised her hand. "Excuse me," she called out. "Is this about that young woman you shoved earlier? Because I saw it." Kendra opened her mouth, but no words came. A man in a hoodie added, "Same here." "Wasn't right." Murmurs of agreement followed. Danielle didn't move. She didn't need to. The truth was standing up on its own. Just then, 3 uniformed officers boarded, 2 men, 1 woman. They conferred with the captain, then addressed the cabin. The lead officer, tall and calm, said, "We're conducting an investigation involving a member of the United States military. Please remain seated." He turned to Danielle. "Ma'am, would you be willing to step forward to speak with us privately?" She nodded. Stood. Moved with the kind of quiet confidence that came from discipline, not pride. As she passed down the aisle, a hand reached out and gently squeezed her shoulder. Someone whispered, "Thank you for your service." Danielle didn't smile. Not yet. But she felt it, something loosening in her chest. A quiet kind of power rising. At the front of the plane, just past the galley, Officer Malik Jordan introduced himself. "We've received a report of inappropriate contact and verbal misconduct. Just need your account." Danielle gave a crisp nod. "Flight attendant pushed me while I was stowing my bag. I asked her not to touch me." She raised her voice. "I remained seated and contacted my military liaison." Another officer jotted notes. "Any threats made? Any escalation?" "No threats. I didn't engage after that." Officer Jordan gave a small nod. "Thank you, ma'am." Behind them, the captain approached, face tight. "Miss Harris, on behalf of the airline, I apologize. We've already been contacted by Department of Defense personnel. We're grounding the plane until this is resolved." A few feet away, Kendra Vale stood stiff as a board. Her eyes flicked between the officers and the captain. Airline management entered moments later. 2 men in navy blazers. One pulled Kendra aside. Danielle couldn't hear the exact words, but phrases like misconduct, pending termination, and removal from duty were Loud enough. Kendra's face crumpled. She tried to argue. Her voice cracked. Passengers watched. Silent. Still. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. Kendra was escorted off the plane. No applause. No cheers. Just a collective exhale. The airline representative returned to Danielle. Miss Harris, we understand if you no longer feel comfortable flying with us today. We can rebook you immediately, free of charge. Danielle looked down the long aisle. Thought of her mother's cooking. Her niece's smile. Her father's half-hug. I'll stay, she said. I didn't do anything wrong. The rep nodded respectfully. Understood. And just like that, the plane began preparing for takeoff. Danielle returned to her seat. The man in the hoodie leaned across the aisle and said, "Good on you." For the first time all day, she smiled. Just a little. But it was real. The hum inside Flight 462 was different now, quieter, heavier, like every passenger could feel the shift in the air even though no one said it aloud. Danielle Harris sat upright in her seat, eyes steady on the back of the headrest in front of her, her spine still tall despite the exhaustion clinging to every limb. Around her, passengers were no longer flipping through safety cards or checking their phones. Instead, they watched with the kind of silent attention that only surfaced when something serious was happening, something they all knew deep down wasn't about a delay, but about a moment that had crossed the line. The intercom crackled again, this time firmer. Airport security has been requested to assist. Please remain seated. As the final words echoed through the cabin, a subtle stir rolled through the rows, passengers glancing at each other, some shifting to sit straighter, others just silently watching. From the front of the aircraft, the cockpit door opened again. The captain stepped out, face composed, jaw tight, speaking into his shoulder mic with short, clipped words. Within moments, they arrived, 3 officers stepping onto the plane with quiet authority. The lead, a tall black man with calm eyes and a presence that silenced the whispers, wore a badge that read, Officer Malik Jordan. He moved with a deliberate grace, the kind of composure that came from years of handling chaos without needing to raise his voice. He scanned the cabin once before his eyes landed on Danielle. He stepped forward with the respect of a man who recognized both the uniform she wore and the strength she carried. "Ma'am," he said gently, "would you be willing to speak with us for a moment?" Danielle nodded. No hesitation. No drama. She stood slowly, methodically, each movement smooth and precise. As she walked up the aisle toward the galley, a few passengers leaned back to give her space. Someone whispered thank you as she passed. She didn't break stride. She didn't look back. Officer Jordan and his team led her to a cleared area near the front of the plane, away from the ears and eyes of the cabin but still close enough for the gravity of the moment to remain palpable. "We've received a report regarding inappropriate physical contact and possible verbal misconduct," Jordan said, his voice low and professional. "We just need your account." Danielle met his eyes without flinching. "The flight attendant, Kendra Vale, shoved me in the aisle while I was trying to stow my bag," she stated. "I told her not to touch me. She dismissed it. Then she made a loud, disrespectful comment in front of the cabin. One of the other officers, a woman with a neat bun and quick pen, scribbled notes. Any threats made? No, sir, Danielle said. I remained seated. I made a call to my military liaison to report the incident, as instructed during deployment. Officer Jordan nodded. Understood. Thank you, Master Sergeant. Meanwhile, the rest of the officers moved through the cabin, beginning interviews with passengers who had witnessed the incident. The energy inside the aircraft changed again, whispers became statements, and quiet observation gave way to collective recollection. The elderly Latina woman in row 17 raised her hand as soon as an officer approached. I saw the whole thing, she said firmly. That young lady didn't do anything wrong. That attendant pushed her and acted like she didn't even exist. A man in a dark hoodie, seated across from Danielle's row, spoke up next. It was out of line, he said. I saw it too. She handled it better than I would have. More passengers chimed in. Quiet nods turned into words. Witness after witness confirmed the sequence of events, each voice adding to a growing wave of accountability. No one was shouting. No one was angry. But truth has a way of building weight, especially when enough people decide to carry it together. Airline management boarded shortly after, two men in pressed suits with credentials swinging from their necks. Their expressions were tense, eyes scanning the cabin as they spoke briefly with the officers. One of them, a silver-haired man with tired eyes, pulled Kendra aside near the beverage cart. Danielle couldn't hear everything, but fragments floated through the charged air: inexcusable conduct, pending disciplinary action, temporary suspension. Kendra's face paled. Her mouth opened as if to defend herself, but the words faltered. She looked around the cabin for support and found only silence. No one met her eyes. No one offered her an out. When the officers escorted her off the plane, there was no applause. No vindication. Just stillness, the kind that fills the space when something that's been unspoken for too long finally gets named out loud. The silence didn't feel awkward. It felt earned. Danielle remained near the galley as the airline representative approached her, offering a restrained but respectful nod. "Master Sergeant Harris," he began, "we'd like to formally apologize for what you experienced today. We're investigating the matter internally and will be implementing immediate reviews of our crew conduct policies." Danielle said nothing. She didn't need an apology for the sake of optics. She needed people to mean it. "We'd also like to offer you alternative travel arrangements, another flight, a voucher, whatever you need," he added. "At no cost to you." Danielle looked down the length of the plane. Looked past the folded tray tables, the hushed passengers, the hum of the cabin. She thought of her niece, her crooked sign, her family waiting on the other end of this ride. "No," she said simply. "I'm staying. I didn't do anything wrong." The airline rep nodded again. "Understood." Danielle returned to her seat. The passengers watched her pass, not with pity, not with fear, but with a quiet kind of respect. A silent agreement. That was enough. As she buckled her seatbelt again, the man in the hoodie leaned slightly toward her. "I hope she remembers this day," he said. Danielle glanced at him. "Maybe," she said. "But this day's not about her anymore." He nodded, folding his arms. "No. It's about what happens when someone finally says enough, without shouting." Moments later, the captain's voice came over the speaker again. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We're preparing for departure." The announcement wasn't met with claps or cheers, but there was a deep, collective breath, like the cabin could finally exhale. As the plane taxied to the runway and the engines roared to life, Danielle leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Her body was still heavy with fatigue, but her spirit felt lighter. Because sometimes, dignity doesn't come from how loud you speak. It comes from how steady you stand when someone tries to push you down. And that, for the first time in a long while, made her feel like she was truly headed home. The engines rumbled to life beneath her feet, and as Flight 462 began to taxi away from the gate, Danielle Harris sat in her seat, not triumphant, not smug, but steady. She'd been offered another flight, a smoother way out, but she didn't take it. Because walking away would have said she'd done something wrong. And she hadn't. So she stayed. Now, as the nose of the aircraft turned toward the runway and the last rays of the Texas sun streamed through the windows, a quiet settled over the cabin, not tense, not uncomfortable, but respectful. Like every passenger aboard understood they'd just witnessed something worth remembering. A new flight attendant was working the aisle now, younger, softer around the eyes, with a fresh calm in his voice. His name tag read Eli. When he reached Danielle's row with the snack cart, he paused slightly, then offered her a bottle of water and a packet of almonds. "These are on the house," he said gently. "Company orders." Danielle accepted with a quiet nod. "Thanks," she replied, her voice low but even. "Water's perfect." He gave a small, respectful nod and moved on. She didn't need snacks. She didn't need special treatment. What she needed, what everyone needed, was simple. Dignity. A few rows back, the woman with silver hair leaned into the aisle, meeting Danielle's gaze. "Thank you for not letting it slide," she said, her tone firm but warm. "Some folks might have just swallowed it." Danielle nodded. "I didn't come home to stay quiet. I've got a granddaughter in the army," the woman added. "I'd hope someone would stand up for her too." Danielle gave her a faint but genuine smile, the kind that didn't reach the lips so much as settle in the chest. The rest of the flight passed in a kind of reverent calm. No one tried to rehash the incident. No one asked her questions or made a scene. But more than once, a fellow passenger caught her eye and gave a slight nod, a look, a quiet gesture of solidarity. It wasn't loud, but it meant everything. When the captain announced they were beginning descent into Tucson, Danielle sat a little straighter, as if the gravity of landing in her hometown carried a weight only she could feel. Outside the small oval window, the Arizona desert glowed in golden tones, the skyline stretching flat and familiar. She hadn't seen it in almost a year. And now, with the wheels lowering and the sun dipping toward the horizon, she finally allowed herself to exhale. As the plane touched down with a soft jolt and rolled along the tarmac, a few scattered claps echoed through the cabin. Not the kind for a safe landing, but the kind that said, "We saw you. And we're with you." Danielle unbuckled her belt and stood slowly, collecting her things. The man in the hoodie from earlier gave her a quiet fist bump as they stepped into the aisle. "You handled that like a pro," he said. She nodded. Sometimes silence says more than shouting. The older woman offered her a final pat on the shoulder as they began to disembark. "Welcome home, soldier." That time, Danielle smiled for real. It wasn't wide or flashy, but it had depth. The kind of smile that grows from surviving something hard and walking out taller on the other side. As she stepped off the plane and into the terminal, the familiar buzz of Sky Harbor International filled her ears, but this time, it didn't weigh her down. It welcomed her. The automatic doors slid open with a hiss, and the dry heat of the Arizona air wrapped around her like an embrace. And there they were, her family. Her younger brother Marcus, already waving wildly like he hadn't seen her in years. Her parents, standing side by side, beaming through watery eyes. And front and center, her 8-year-old niece Jada, holding a lopsided poster scribbled in red crayon that read, "Welcome home, Auntie Dee." Danielle dropped her duffel to the concrete and swept Jada up into her arms. "You got taller," she laughed, hugging her so tight the little girl squealed. Her mother pulled her into a hug next, peppering kisses across her forehead. "You're home," she whispered. Her dad, stoic as always, finally gave up trying to record the moment and just hugged her too, strong arms wrapped around all the things they didn't say out loud. For a few sacred minutes, the world faded. No plane. No flight attendant. No cabin full of watching eyes. Just love. Just family. But as they walked toward the parking garage, Danielle's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She paused, glanced at the screen, then answered. "This is Harris." The voice on the other end was crisp and formal. "Master Sergeant Harris, this is Camille Harper, Regional Director of Passenger Relations. I'm calling to personally apologize for what occurred on Flight 462. We've reviewed the statements and surveillance footage. The flight attendant in question has been suspended pending termination." Danielle was silent for a beat. Not because she needed justice to be loud or public, but because the wheels of accountability had started to move, and that meant something. Camille continued, her voice softening. "We're also implementing new training for all flight staff, effective immediately. That includes mandatory sessions on respectful engagement with all passengers, especially service members. I know it's overdue. I'm sorry it took this incident to push it forward." Danielle finally spoke. "That's a start." "Yes, ma'am. And again, thank you for how you handled yourself. You didn't just report a problem. You reminded us of who we're supposed to be. Danielle ended the call with a quiet thank you and slid the phone into her back pocket. No press release. No headline. Just a change. That was enough. In the car ride home, her mom turned from the front seat. You okay, baby? Danielle looked out at the red-tinged sky melting into the desert. I'm good, Mama. Really good. Because today wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about humiliation or payback. It was about standing your ground when someone tries to knock you off it. It was about quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. And maybe, just maybe, someone else would carry that same strength forward. As they pulled into her parents' driveway and Jada bounced out of the back seat, Danielle took one last look at the sky, painted in gold and grace. Dignity wasn't something you earned by wearing a uniform. It was something every person deserved the moment they drew breath. You just had to be willing to remind the world sometimes. Not by yelling, but by standing tall. Eyes forward. Back straight. Truth on your side. Sometimes the battles that shape us don't happen on foreign soil. Sometimes they happen in the most unexpected places, a plain aisle, a boarding gate, a crowded cabin. Master Sergeant Danielle Harris didn't raise her voice, she didn't retaliate with anger, and she didn't demand applause. But what she did was far more powerful. She stood her ground with dignity, integrity, and quiet strength. In a world that often rewards the loudest voice in the room, Danielle reminded us that real courage doesn't always look like confrontation, it often looks like calm. When disrespected, she didn't mirror that disrespect. She didn't need to. Because her worth wasn't up for debate. It never has been. This story isn't just about one woman in uniform. It's about the countless individuals, service members, working-class heroes, quiet warriors, who walk through life demanding nothing more than basic human decency. It's about the importance of speaking up when you see wrong being done. Whether you're wearing combat boots or sneakers, a uniform or street clothes, you have the power to stand for what's right without shouting. If you take one thing from Danielle's experience, let it be this: you don't have to match disrespect with more disrespect. Let your strength speak through your actions. Speak the truth, even when your voice is quiet. And never let someone else decide your worth. To those who watched and listened to Danielle's story, thank you. You are part of what makes change possible. Every time you support stories like hers, you help rewrite a narrative that's far too familiar for many. And to every passenger who spoke up in that cabin, and to every listener who's ever chosen to step up for someone else, you're the reason justice has a chance. On behalf of the team at U.S. Justice Story, thank you for watching, for feeling, and for believing that integrity still matters. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it with someone who needs a reminder that standing tall doesn't require shouting, it only requires truth. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, keep standing strong.